Every deal that stalled in the disability market, and I studied 40 of them, only one thing separated the ones that closed from the ones that didn't. It wasn't the product, it wasn't the price, it wasn't even the pitch. So I'm going to show you exactly what it was and how you can use it on your next deal. In this video, here's what we're covering. 1, why deals stall. 2, the pattern that closes. And 3, how to apply it today. Let's go. Let me give you the scope of what we're actually talking about here. So the disability market, and when I say disability market, I mean every product, service, and solution designed to support people with disabilities and the aging population. It's a $23 trillion market. This is not a niche, not a charity sector. $23 trillion. It doesn't operate as one market. It operates as 24 independent markets, each one with its own buyers, its own budget cycles, and its own decision-making structure. Here's the demographic reality that changes everything. By 2034, seniors will outnumber children in the United States for the first time in US history. The demand in this market isn't slowing down. It is accelerating. So the question isn't whether the opportunity is real. The question is, why aren't the deals closing? Before I get into the pattern, you need to understand why I can see this. I'm Jordan Saunders. I'm the CEO of the Resource Key. And before that, I was a speech language pathologist. That means I spent years inside the world your buyers are trying to sell into. I sat with the users, seniors, individuals with different disabilities, caregivers, and I came to understand exactly what people needed based on their needs and why they needed it. Then I crossed over to the business side. I watched deal after deal. The same thing happened. The user wanted the product. The need was undeniable. The solution was right there, and the deal still didn't close. That pattern, that specific breakdown, that is what I built my entire practice around solving. After studying 40 deals across this market, the reason became crystal clear. Here's what's actually happening. In the disability and aging market, you have two completely different conversations happening at the same time. And most salespeople are only having one of them. The first conversation is with the user, the senior who needs aging in place technology, the student with a learning disability who needs assistive technology, the person with a mobility challenge who needs a smart home solution. That conversation is emotional. It's about independence. It's about dignity. It's about quality of life. Salespeople are great at that conversation. But then there's a second conversation. This one happens behind closed doors, in a procurement meeting, a budget review, in a chief financial officer's office. This conversation isn't emotional at all. This conversation is, what is the return on investment? What is the risk? How does this justify the spend? And here is the gap that stalls almost all deals. The salesperson just had an incredible conversation with the user, and then they walk into the buyer's office and they try to have the same conversation. They lead with the user's need. They speak in emotional language. They describe the impact on the person's life, and the buyer, who is not the user, looks at them and says, "That's great. I can't approve this though." Not because the buyer doesn't care. The salesperson never gave them what they needed to say yes. That is the justification problem, and it shows up in every single market inside this 23 trillion space. So here are 3 steps to close in the disability market. After studying 40 deals, here's the pattern that separated every close from every loss. The salespeople who closed, they weren't better at the emotional pitch. They were better at building a bridge between what the user needs and what the buyer needs to hear to say yes. And here are the 3 steps. Step number 1, separate the conversations completely. You need 2 different scripts, not 2 versions of the same script, 2 entirely different scripts with 2 entirely different goals. Your user script answers, what does this do for you? Your buyer script answers, what does this do for your organization? Let me give you an example. The assistive technology market is $4.5 trillion. It carries an 18 to 25% projected return on investment over 5 years. Low to medium risk, very high market disruption potential. Now, when you're talking to the user, you are not leading with that number. You are talking about independence. You are talking about what their life looks like when this technology is in it. But when you walk into the buyer's office, you lead with exactly that number. $4.5 trillion market, 18 to 25% return on investment. This is not a charity purchase. This is a strategic investment with a measurable return. Most salespeople bring the user script into the buyer's room, and that is where the deal stalls. Separate the conversations. Step 1. Step 2, give the buyer a reason that belongs to them, not to the user. Here's what I mean. The aging in place market is $2.7 trillion. Age tech is growing at 15 to 20% return on investment annually. Smart home accessibility, $2.3 trillion, 18 to 28% return. Very high disruptor potential. So when a buyer is sitting across from you, they have one job: justify the spin to someone above them. They need a reason that protects them professionally. They need data that makes the yes look not just kind, but they need the data to be able to back what they're about to bring. So your job before you walk into the room is to build their justification for them. You hand them the market data, you frame it around their industry, you show them what their competitors are missing and what they stand to gain by moving first. So let's say the transportation market inside the disability and aging space, $3.2 trillion, 25 to 35% projected return on investment. So this is one of the highest in the sub-markets that I've tracked. It's not a soft argument. That is a boardroom argument. And so you need to give the buyer a reason that is theirs. So that's step 2. And step 3 is, this is one that nobody is really talking about. You don't just need to convince the buyer, you need to help the buyer convince their buyer. Okay, let me say that one again. You don't just need to convince the buyer, you need to help the buyer convince their buyer. So in complex markets, and the disability and aging market is it is a complex buying environment, because the person you're selling to is rarely the final approver. So they have to go back to, let's say, a committee, maybe a board, a department head. And if you leave that room without giving them everything they need to make that internal case, the deal stalls. Not because they didn't want it, because you left them without anything to be able to back when they go in these rooms. So here's what you can do. Before you close the meeting, you can ask one question. What would make this easier for you to bring back to your team? Then you can build that thing. You can build a one-pager, you build a return on investment summary, you pull maybe the market data from your research, and you can put it in a format that they can hand to the next person in the chain. You are not just a salesperson anymore. Now you are their internal advocate. So you are the person who closes the approval gap, the gap between the person who wants to say yes and the person who has to sign off. So that is step 3. When you do all 3 of these things, separate conversations, buyer's reason, close the approval gap. And here is what I found across every deal that closed. The objection at approval essentially disappears because you already answered it before it was asked. Here's what the data showed me across those 40 deals in this market. The deals that stalled had one thing in common. The salesperson had one script, one conversation, one approach, regardless of who was in the room. The deals that closed had one thing in common. The salesperson understood that the user and the buyer are 2 different people with 2 different problems, and they solved both. So this market, all $23 trillion of it, is not hard to sell. It is hard to sell to the wrong person using the wrong conversation. The disability and aging market spans 24 sectors. There's wearable health technology, I think that's 1.8 trillion, voice technology, about 1.2 trillion, mental health tech, 2.1 trillion. Every single one of them has the same justification problem. Every single one of them responds to the same bridge. That's the pattern that I saw, 40 deals and then one answer. So let me bring this back to the beginning. So step 1, separate your conversations completely. User script and buyer script are not the same script. Step 2, give the buyer a reason that belongs to them. Market data, return on investment projections, competitive positioning. Make the yes easier for them by providing them this information. Step 3, close the approval gap. Build their internal pitch before you leave the room. The 23 trillion disability is not underserved because the products are bad or because the need isn't there. It is underserved because nobody is teaching the people selling in it how to bridge the gap between the user's world and the buyer's boardroom. And that bridge is what closes. If you want to apply this framework to your specific market, your specific deals, go ahead and I'll put the link in the comments for Convert in the 23 trillion disability market session. We have another one coming up April 13th and 14th, and I will include the link below, as well as the 23 trillion disability market report that I referenced. I will see you there.